Meltem Bağış Akkaya, welcome to Digital Markets Research Hub. I had the opportunity on several occasions to observe your presentation and reflections upon the development of the competition policy in Turkey and beyond. So I wanted to ask you a few questions about the functioning of competition in Turkey and also in the European Union, with a focus on digital markets, but maybe also looking broader as well. But for most of us who always hear about the development in Turkey, but it's rather fragmentary. So maybe it would be helpful to start with offering somehow outline about the agency, its main institutional settings.
Thank you, Oles, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be having this interview. I had the pleasure of meeting you in Oxford meetings, so I really liked the perspective you have brought to competition from a very different angle. So let's start with your question. The competition policy is handled by the Turkish authority, Turkish Competition Authority. The authority was set up as early as 1997. And I proudly say I was one of the first experts to be hired back then. And I stayed here all of these 26 years. So, right, it's amazing, isn't it? When you look at back and you say 26 years, no, it's too long. Anyway, time flies by. So I guess I am one of the people who can comment on how we have, gone through all these good and bad days, so to say. But the competition authority is a little different than its peers, in many peers, especially when it comes to European peers, because we don't have consumer protection powers. And through this interview, I guess I'm going to repeat this because it sort of limits us to a vacuum. Lately, as Professor Ariel in his groundbreaking paper has said, well, competition law has to extend to include all areas of economy, right? Because if you are, limited to a little vacuum, then your powers are a little bit sort of restricted, so to say, if I'm able to say this. Anyway, back to competition authorities setting then. When we started, we were 50 experts, quite young. And then we managed to build up quite a reputable organization all in Turkey. The institution from its very first days was set up as an autonomous body that was quite strange to the bureaucratic system, even now, and imagine back then. The authority was set up at that time in order to speed up Turkey's accession to the then EU, so to say, accession membership program, which never came to life all these years. And this is why we had the backup of the governments and some governmental bodies that time. The second was, it was set up, and it is still a quasi-judiciary body, which is quite unknown to the Turkish system, because we do hold oral hearings, and that just applies to the courts. I don't know any other Turkish administrative body that does this. So this is quite strange. And we had another power, we still have this, making on-site inspections or dawn raids, some others prefer to say. And that was met with huge protests from the companies and for the courts, of course. That's quite unknown because that applies to the police when they do judiciary powers. We didn't have that one, but we used it to the extreme ends, and we succeeded in this. We proved ourselves. It wasn't easy, to tell you the truth. The first decade wasn't quite easy because we had to express ourselves then, very rightly so. The companies and consumers, everybody was a bit confused because they didn't understand the two different notions of competition. Consumer protection, protection of competition. What are these and why are these different? We had in the first decade, many of the complaints we received relate to the other competition, consumer protection. When we sort of managed ourselves, when we were able to express ourselves, what we are exactly doing, things started to change again because this time we had platforms and things have changed. So Now we are still in between. So I'm quite envy those in my, you know, sort of 26 years of experience, I still envy those agencies who have these powers.
Absolutely. I think it's very helpful to see this the reflection, your reflection being inside of the authority for decades, and knowing, witnessing, and contributing to its evolution and maturing. And I wanted to ask you, my next question is that, okay, it has been created, established as part of the accession process, and so it didn't emerge almost kind of naturally, organically within the evolution of the economic regulation, let's say. And but it has been embedded naturally. Now it's part and parcel of how the markets are being regulated. But then we have changes in our overall understanding of the role of competition authorities in this constellation, because very recently the idea was you distance yourself from any political impact, because any immeasurable, non-calculable elements would be seen as a kind of noise which pollute the clarity of your analysis, of your economic toolbox, etc. Now it appears that that was a little bit naive or too simplistic to think that the truth is somehow hidden in economic formulas, and you can deduce, discover, unravel this labyrinth. It's something more than that. Competition policy goes beyond the formulas.
I agree
Supposedly.
fully.
We don't know, but
there is more to it. There is more to it.
So how, and this gives more opportunities to set up different format of relationship between the agent. Despite its autonomy, it's still a public authority, and thus it should be informed, fed, I wouldn't say steered, but informed about the broader vision, strategy. Is it? Should it be? Do you build your relationship with relevant ministries on a par basis, or is kind of more subordination? How do you coexist?
Here's how we do things. First of all, our law is quite generous, to tell you the truth. It says it covers all areas of goods and services markets. There is no exception. That's excellent. Doesn't give us any exception. Of course, when it comes to our day-by-day complaints, here's how we work, first of all. We work on a complaint basis. We receive complaints from consumers, from companies. Anyone in the economy could file a complaint. That's quite easy. You do it online, lately online. All you have to do is put it online. In order to give this more space to people, it's most of the time, majority of the time, preferred to be done anonymously, which is a great thing. The second thing is, if you, of course, support some evidence, which is our work, we do, of course, sometimes receive complaints or files from ministries through a body that is called Communication Center, Presidential Communication Center, but it's just forwarding over the complaints they have received. So we don't have any orders or anything. We don't have a tight relationship with a ministry, any ministry. So this is to tell you that we are quite independent in our work. No ministry, no any governmental body tells us what to do, what not to do. But then, of course, there's a problem with regulators, sector regulators. We are the first one to be set up as an autonomous body. Then we have the bank regulator, then we have energy regulator, which we sometimes clash. But we are, since the law is quite generous in saying that it covers everything, we do have many cases. We have had too many cases in all markets. The one exception, however, is the banking regulators area competence. There is one exception. It says if two Turkish banks merge and they have a threshold market share of lower than 20%, then we have the Turkish Competition Authority has nothing to do with this. Other than this, we are quite flexible. Many times, especially from, not from the regulators, but from the companies, we have received a defense saying that, listen, you don't have a role here it's the regulator, it's the specific regulator's job to do this. You have nothing. Many times in investigations, they come up with this defense, but this was never accepted. I don't remember a single case that was accepted. That's the only exception law. So we try to work with, then we, of course, like everybody else, we have memorandum of understandings in order to clarify clashes with regulators. So we work like this. And then there is another thing with the privatization authority. That's another autonomous body. They are under the, they are obliged to send us, when there is a privatization, when they are potential buyers, they have to send us the potential buyers and we look at them from a competition perspective to see whether they're okay or not. And then we send back them our opinion, and that is binding on them. That's how we work.
And in terms of, do you have sufficient capacity to investigate more or less proportionately different areas, or you have to give some choices and priorities and focus on specific aspects more enthusiastically than on others? And what underpins your choices?
Legally, we have no choice to prioritize cases or investigations. So we do work on complaint basis, so first come, first serve, so to say. But then there is, of course, sometimes there are many times there are multiple complaints regarding the same infringement, or sometimes the same company on the same sector or some sector. So we sometimes pile them up, and in order to have administrative economy, so we try to pile them up. But then usually we work through complaints, and then there's, of course, ex officio. We do initiate cases on our own, and lately we do it more. We try to do it more. We are quite a busy organization, to tell you the truth, because the country, our country, my country, Turkey, has been going through very difficult economic times, like all others. But we have another difficulty because we had two major currency crises in the last 5 to 6 years. Then we had COVID times, which has changed everything, not only social, also economic dynamics. Then on top, we have the Russia-Ukraine war, which is still going on, unfortunately, and that's because of our ties, economic ties. Things have changed. And then the last and the most unfortunate one, we had a very unfortunate earthquake last year, which has shattered the country's economic dynamics. So altogether, this has made us receive too many complaints on excessive prices and unfair prices. So in order to address everything, but first of all, the nation, the consumers have no patience. I can understand them. I'm a consumer myself. I don't have the patience to wait for 1.5 years, 2 years, 3 years to see a result when I file a complaint. So they're quite impatient. So are the politicians, which is quite normal, or the government, because everybody wants answers, immediate answers. And we are bombarded with cases and cases. Just to give you, we're a very busy authority, just to give you some numbers. Let me see. It's a little boring, but it gives you an idea what we have done. So we have received record high number of complaints in the last 2 years. Last year, we have started 45 new investigations. We have 43 ongoing ones. We have finalized, listen to this, 220 mergers and acquisitions. It doesn't stop here yet. We have had, let's see, too many exemption cases. We've been doing, now this is something. We have held more than 800 down rates in one single year. Because too many excessive prices complaints, too many unfair cases, too many abuse of luminous cases, unilateral cartel cases. And these cases lately relate to 3 major sectors. One of them is, of course, grocery retailing, of course. The second one is the platforms, digital platforms. And the third one is the cement sector, because of the high price of housing, the development, because it's a young country in need of new housing, because we have immigrants, around 10 million immigrants who are in need of new housing. So this is how we are busy. And you would ask how many people you have. When I started, we were only 50, and now we have around a little less than 300 experts, 280 it must be. And is it enough? Well, you never say it's enough, of course. The more, the better. But then, of course, there's a legal line that you have to take. So this is how we are doing this. And the thing is, maybe this would be something to tell. When we started, as I already said, when we started doing these dawn raids, on-site inspections, we were met with a huge protest. Then we sort of understood, we were able to tell the crowd that this is needed. Listen, we have to do this. And around the time we started doing this, it's almost been like 3 decades, we were just checking PCs. And when I started, there was no tablets. People didn't have WhatsApp. We didn't have smartphones back then. So it was PCs and agendas and some notes and notebooks of people, of the company staff. And now we have arrived, and fast forward 26 years, now there is WhatsApp, Microsoft Teams, all other communications, and of course, smartphones. People use smartphones more than they use PCs or tablets. And when we do site inspections, on-site inspections, we use a lot of sophisticated IT forensic tools and systems. And this is the area now we have a problem, because we have a policy and then legally we are entitled to check not only the PCs or tablets or mobile phones of the company that we are searching, if it's a business, but if it's a personal device, but it's used for business purposes, then we also check their WhatsApp communications. And this is where the real problem starts for us. The courts and the companies, and there's a new type of fine that we are frequently imposing, that is, it says, a fine that is imposed just because of the resistance to block or to impede any down rate because of this. I think we might be one of the few agencies who is checking WhatsApp communications on, so to say, personal gadgets, as long as they are used for business purposes. This is our landscape now.
My next question would be, obviously, when should we expect a novel or something more substantial from you? Because I imagine there is a lot of evidence of interesting stories which would make it really a great book or something. So if you're planning it, please go ahead. It would be really fascinating to read it.
Actually, I always thought, because when I started working, we had so many funny stories because people didn't know. We didn't know what we were expecting. They didn't know what to expect, the companies. So we had so many funny instances. And now we have different stories. So you're right. There are too many things to write. Let's say when I sort of, that's the time, politically it's not correct to say, but when one leaves the authority, that's the time to write these things. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, and I really look forward, and I would be really interested in this.
Thank you.
Leaving aside the figures of speech, sincerely. We met recently at an event where the issue of retail problems with competition law have been discussed, and among other things, you've been explaining to the audience and to the co-panelists the activities of the Turkish Competition Authority in different linked to the issues which are not always or not directly relevant for competition law sensu stricto, but which go beyond a little bit and affect consumers. So you can see definitely some instances of or some relevant or direct relevance of competition law in the broader sense, but not necessarily in the direct immediate connotation. Such phenomena as shrinkflation, for example, yeah, and others. Can you please provide to us a kind of an outline of your maybe recent activity, latest cases, etc., and overall the situation?
Well, the thing is, as I said, these unfortunate sequence of events have brought us to a point where consumers are met every day in their daily lives with quite high, so to say, excessive prices. It's probably cartel prices. So the majority of the cases, complaints we received, or the cases we started on our own on ex officio, relates to usually grocery retailing issues. And these are not easy to draw a line, a hard line between what is competition and what is consumer protection. There is this new phenomenon, especially in my country, and I'm reading that also in the US and up to a certain point in some also in Europe, the phenomenon of shrinkflation, skimpflation. So on top of raising the prices, companies in the grocery retailing field tend to increase their prices through shrinked products, where you see smaller products, very smartly produced. They look like as they were before, but the grams or the ingredients have been shrinked, or the ingredients are shrunk and skimmed to an extreme end, as long as the regulation, the health regulation allows them to do so. So this is, according to many, this is not a competition problem. My personal opinion, that's not binding on the competition authority, of course, that's a disclaimer. So my personal opinion, as a professor of, I'm also teaching competition law, digital law, and microeconomics in both in Turkey and in Italy. So my experience and my understanding of economy as a whole is that this is a competition law issue, especially the skimpflation issue. But here in Turkey, since we have the trade ministry quite active in the consumer protection area, they had a new, so to say new, of course, what is new and what is old is debated these days, right? Once when you used to say new was like 10 years, and now anything that is last year became already old. That's an era that everything has lost. So as soon as the COVID pandemic started, the government came up with a new law covering times of extraordinary economic fluctuations and natural disasters. And it said, in any price that is fair, that is unfair or excessively high, would be deemed illegal as regardless of the company's market power. So that obviously that means for us, for competition people, that means we don't need to search for a dominance in excessive prices cases. So we have the comfort of now, since that it saves us from the debate whether what is it, what is not, what is competition, what is not. So that is done by the trade minister, and they seem to be quite active and doing well from what I see. I don't know the dynamics, to be honest with you, frankly speaking. I have no idea, but what I see from the monthly release of the ministry, that they are really, and consumers are quite happy because it's a fast track complaints procedure. The ministry seems to be finalizing everything in every markets, in every single point of along the retail scale, everything, every product, with a very huge number of stuff, and then it's done within a month. Anything in the Turkish context, in Turkish competition context, any investigation at least takes up to 1.5 years. After 1.5 years, things are forgotten. And in inflation times, high and chronic inflation times, all references to price are lost. Everything is lost. What is cheap yesterday or what is excessive yesterday cannot be today. So people want quick answers, and governments and politicians, I think this is, it looks a little regulatory, of course. And the more you go up these stairs, the more the handling of issues get complicated. But for the time being, it saves us from this debate of shrinkflation, inflation. But as I already explained my own idea, I think it can well be a competition issue.
But you mentioned and illustrated why this regulatory toolbox is akin more to the new competition tool than the traditional ex post competition. So let us move to this territory. bearing in mind that there are a few very interesting ex post cases, which we also will try to cover as well in this conversation. But speaking of ex ante stuff,
ex ante competition law community doesn't like too much, but they have to. We have
to acknowledge its inevitability, and we see that it's not a DMA not the DMA which created this phenomenon. So it was coming from different, exactly, as you just highlighted to us. So I was wondering, what's the situation with the Turkish equivalent, broad equivalent to the DMA? Do you witness significant discussions, significant need for it? Is it, if yes, then would the initiative come from you or from the central government? What is the state of affairs there?
I think I can humbly say that in 2020, I was the head of the Department of Strategic Planning in the authority and the External Relations Department. So I was heading 2 departments. And then I was already teaching back then, about 10 years, on digital economy. And I was the one to watch what was going on. I was closely watching what was going on the digital landscape. And I was following what was happening in the US, these reports. And me, not only, of course, myself, but then as a department and colleagues. And that time, the board was quite keen. We decided it's better as soon as we follow what's going on in the world. And because we were already receiving platform complaints and we were already following them. And we have arrived at a point that we said, we also saw that, okay, this expose is no longer enough. Why is not? Because these digital platforms work with a very different business model, a very novel business model, database, data-driven, that we have never seen. There was this notion of zero-priced goods, which made all our calculations and all our understandings of harm theories upside down. There's no price. You get a zero, you pay zero price for the service you get. Oh, how lovely. Is it lovely? So we were discussing this, and then we saw that every single authority back in 2020, we're carrying out investigations and inquiries. So I said, listen, let's start an inquiry, market inquiry into digital sphere in order whether we would need it or not. Let's not rush into conclusions, and let's look at the Turkish landscape, digital landscape, and which proved that it's no different than all the others, of course, because we have the same big tech companies operating in Turkey. The things are not different. And what we have seen is that there is a pace of innovations that we have never seen in our lifetime. It's quite quick. The business models were changing quickly. The ecosystems were enlarging with a pace that we have never seen in any of the conglomerate companies in our workload. And then the third is, of course, again, it brings us to this problem of being lagging behind. Anything we have started, any investigation we have started wasn't quick enough because of the procedural requirements. You have to file a case, you have to go take the defense, and they have an extended time, which is at least 1.5 years. During COVID times, when the market inquiry was going on in order to see whether we need a DMA version or not, under of course, the pressure from the crowd and the excessive pricing cases and dominance cases, we tried to shorten the time frame that we were working on the cases, but even that was enough. What is shortened for us doesn't mean shortened for the consumers. Anyway, so we ended up thinking, okay, we do need a DMA version law frame, legal frame. And this came from our body. So we initiated it. The Turkish Competition Authority initiated it. We have started working on a draft similar to the DMA, but then of course DMA covers the whole European Union. Second, it has a very, to my understanding, of course, excuse me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is it's too much regulatory landscape. So we wanted to embed these rules, digital sphere rules, into competition law. So we have a sort of in-between draft now, we started with a very different one and we ended up with another version. Right now it's in the parliament. It's going to be discussed and enacted, supposed to be, but you never know these things. When a draft is a draft, you never know what the outcome could be. But as it is, as it stands right now, we have defined gatekeepers and we have defined core platform services. The responsibilities of the gatekeepers would be defined according to their core platform services if they have one or more. And gatekeepers would have the responsibility, a list of responsibilities to refrain and to do. And so this is a version of DMA, of course. So I don't think we are late. So it was enacted, DMA was enacted 2 years ago, and then we are expecting it to happen by the end of this year, but we never know, of course. I cannot comment on.
Absolutely. I think it's even, there are many opportunities to learn and to observe from the first phase of how it functions on the ground rather than just in the minds of the protagonists. And I heard recently, actually at the latest Ascola event, there was a roundtable, and Zeynep Ayata, referring to the latest development in the Turkish competition policy, she mentioned when referring to this proposal, that one of the mechanisms facilitating the participative approach between the enforcer and the gatekeeper were very original, and I find it very prudent, actually. I think it's a very interesting feature, but I wanted to ask you, maybe you can elaborate on it more, that it envisages a discussion, a communication between the enforcer and the gatekeeper about the scope, precise scope of each specific obligation.
Right, and each specific core platform.
And each core platform says, so you go further than just like UK is doing with tailoring obligations. But I'm interested in this kind of communication element. So it's not just we as an authority decide that would be better. You engage in continuous dialogue or multi-logue, trying to fine-tune what would be better for the interests of competition system in Turkey, but also which would be more or less compatible with the business model of the gatekeeper. So it's supposed to be amicable or more or less collegial. Yeah, it shouldn't be confrontational from day one or not.
From what I see, I think lessons were learned from the DMA experience. And we learned a lot from what's going on in the European sphere. And then we have checked what's going on other parts of the world. And rather than designating a platform or a company, you're a gatekeeper, that's it. This is the list, here's the list. You do this, you don't do this. I think it's better to have because once you designate, it's very difficult to, take it back, or you limit a company in a certain sphere, and then that's very regulatory approach. We are a competition authority. We are not a regulatory body in the end. Let's not forget this. So this draft, as it is right now, envisages a sort of a dialogue. Gatekeeper itself, but also on its own, on each services. So in order to designate a platform as a gatekeeper, there are multiple things to do. The first thing is that the board is going to issue a secondary legislation which defines the quantitative thresholds. And this is where a little bit of missing voices. It's then on top of the things, the draft says, even if the quantitative thresholds are not met, however, due to the very nature of the digital sphere, there are some qualitative features to be checked as well, which could help us to designate a platform as a gatekeeper. These are network effects, lock-in, tipping, so all the classical things that we have been seeing and reading in the digital platform area. So I think this is, when it's, we don't know, of course, whether it's going to be, of course, applied like this, or it's going to be the parliament accepts it as it is. But if it is done like this, I think it's going to be, there will be a room for dialogue between us and the gatekeepers. And the only thing, to be honest with you, that we have received too many protests from, of course, the gatekeepers is that once the gatekeeper is designated as a platform is designated as a gatekeeper, until the 90 days before the termination day, if it's silent, it's going to be extended another period. So this is where people reacted too much, but there is still, I think it's not fair because there is still the room. It says anytime, if you think you are not, you have the burden is on the platform to challenge this decision. So if you think you are not at any, if things change, of course things change quickly in this sphere, as is everything in private sector, they can challenge it easily, and not easily is not a good word, of course, but they can challenge it with their own data that we don't own. That's my understanding of the draft as it is right now.
Very, very interesting. And it, of course, it would be very interesting to see how it evolved from your proposal through the coming through the parliament, because as we all understand in these issues, really millimeters matter in terms of how the wording is chosen and which formulas are being used, and you can underpin any change by very benevolent intentions. You can refer to consumers or whatever the vocabulary could be by colleges, by legislators, and then you can end up easily with something which is very different to what you anticipated to be. So it would be interesting to see the evolution.
I agree fully. One tiny word could change everything, and then it's not just for competition law. In every areas of law, words are quite. I'm not a lawyer by education, but I've learned in all these years that one word changes everything in law, everything. So we'll see how it goes.
But I'm sure you have you monitor this process in the parliament, and the authority has its say in how it should be.
For the time being, it looks like it's met with a well, the government seems to be quite keen on enacting this, but I tell you, this is what the story is right now.
Let me ask you a more substantive question. You mentioned and thus answered it in part already that the markets, digital markets in Turkey are quite similar to what we see, I would say, well, in Western world everywhere. Yeah, you have dominance of some companies and pretty much absence in vast majority of cases of local players of comparable size, scale, and potential, maybe even. At the level of startup, we have many promises, but then there are usual exit roads for startups. Yeah, you either die or being hoovered up by a larger player, with some exceptions. So I wanted to ask you: do you see, if you are asked to provide a kind of snapshot about the development of digital markets in Turkey, is it exactly the same, or do you have some specific players maybe in Turkey in digital markets which come up with interesting business model and consumers and business users using them, and they are developing, they still have enough oxygen to train their muscles and to grow and maybe even to enter into other markets? Something noticeable in your view?
I think we have, well, it's more or less the same, of course. We have the same big tech players as is everywhere. And then we have some local domestic ones, quite interesting ones. We have two major ones. I think there are, they do deserve to be noted here. One of them is a very, I think it's a genius idea. I like these platforms when they come up with, but this is why we like innovation in this. We are quite scared of stifling innovation, right? This is why we like these business model. They are user-friendly, consumer-friendly. There is one that has become lately, especially just after COVID times, quite international. It's called Getir. It is a dark store specialized in delivery of foods, of grocery retailing. So that's a new business model. I never thought it would work, to tell you the truth. When it started, we were quite suspicious because it just started before the COVID times, and we thought, well, here's the online stores, here's online shopping, and we have all these e-marketplaces. I see no room for these kind of, one shouldn't be very, there's always room for everything in this digital sphere. I just learned from this experience, to be honest with you, as an academic person, right? I speak right now, not a competition person right now. What I see from the Getir experience is that they started, since COVID started, there's a lockdown, and we had a lockdown, legal lockdown for long periods. what we have that the other countries didn't have is elderly people. Elderly is not a good word though. People older than 65 were obliged to stay indoors all days. So that's a major thing. Imagine yourself, you and your partner being 65 years or more, and nobody has kids or everything, or even your kids or your neighbors or your friends cannot help you all the time because you need everything. And online shopping usually refers to young generation. That time we perceived it, and we thought online was a bit, especially in grocery retailing and especially in fresh food and fresh vegetables. We thought it was more into in-store shopping. So it was an extreme case. We never thought it could be a mainstream. Instead, by COVID and with this category of people, they had too many things to ask, too many things to buy online, and this Getir was a good address for them. So it brought everything. It became so successful that dark store, because what is the difference between a classical online shopping and Getir is that Getir works 24 hours. You can order water, soft drinks, tomatoes, cheese, in the middle of the night if you're craving a sandwich. So that was something indeed. That was a very genius idea. And then it became so popular because of the COVID and because of this category of people, that I started seeing it all around the world. It extended to America, to Europe. Lately, I see that they've started shrinking a little bit, but this is one of the different ones than the European, than other big tech that we see. There is another one, a very local one, sahibinden.com. I think translate it into fromtheowner.com. Fromtheowner.com platform is very successful in the being the intermediary in second-hand vehicles, and house sales and house rentals. Became so popular that everybody now, before selling their car, at least it checks the prices as a reference point. So this sahibinden.com from theowner.com, but it's very Turkish. I don't think, I have no idea whether they want to extend their operations abroad, but they're not, of course, scale-wise, things cannot be compared to big tech that we know as big tech, but I see a potential there. That's a different one.
Indeed. Let us move to Exposed. You have quite a few landmark investigations, cases on digital, and something which is kind of everything is digital, but this one a little bit more than everything. So can you maybe highlight the most landmark, the most interesting, impactful, influential cases which you have, and at what stage are they? What is most interesting elements of them?
Okay, let's start then with sahibinden.com, which is just I referred. That's from theowner.com, where we unfortunately the court reversed our findings. In that case, we checked whether the prices were excessive. So we checked the prices with other platforms, and we ended up saying, okay, this is an excessive price case. Excessive price cases back then, until 5 to 6 years ago, wasn't quite frequent, as you would recall. Everybody was quite scared of handling an excessive price case, because we thought that time, what is excessive is quite a debated issue. So how do you define excessive? Anyway, so we concluded and we imposed a fine on the platform saying your prices are excessive. And the court, very interestingly, checked all the data and said, listen, this is an exception. Up until now, we have 3 or 4 excessive prices cases. In order to be a case to be excessive and to be fined like this, you have to be very rigid, and there should be no questions beyond. There should be no questions. However, in your assessment of case, the court said, you checked with the cost and the price, and you checked with the other platforms. Instead, you should have looked at the similar platforms abroad. It's a thing. And second, it said you should not only check whether it's the cost and things, you have to check whether the profit margin is excessive. So it reversed the case. That's the local case. Then we had a couple of, I think we have 3 Facebook cases, which are quite interesting as well. The first one relates to the famous one everyone did back then in 2012, the relationship between WhatsApp and its binding. In order to be able to keep using WhatsApp, you have to accept the terms of confidentiality. They said you have to open your data, personal data, that's it. And the court said, it started ex officio. It said, no, this is too much. We cannot have, let me check exactly what you say, because I want to be very clear on that one. That's an interesting case indeed. Okay, but it said, okay, in order to be able to keep using WhatsApp, you have to give consent to WhatsApp for your data to be shared with Facebook. And this relationship was found to be too much by us. And we said, we asked for an interim decision. We said, okay, stop this tying practice until we have the final decision. So upon this decision, Facebook postponed its application to some months later. And then in relation to the Turkish market, Facebook said, okay, for this Facebook WhatsApp data sharing, it wouldn't be in practice, in force, even for those users who have already given consent. So the case was closed because it lost its ground. We have a recent case on Facebook, Instagram threads case. Instagram, as you already know, if you started up with a new application called Threads, and it said, in order to use Threads, you have to have an Instagram account. If you want to delete your Threads account later on, then you have to delete your Instagram account as well. So according to the Turkish Competition Authority, this was found to be a tying case. It said it leaves no room for the other social media competitors to compete. It's a huge entity. The entry barriers are higher in this case, and then this is a tying case. And we said, okay, listen, if you want this, we opened the investigation, and we said, okay, we asked for an interim decision, and we said, in the form of, we required Meta to suspend this data merging between Instagram and Threads until we take a final decision. So upon this decision, Meta come up with a solution, gave set of suggestions. It said that are quite similar to the ones it said suggested the European Union users. Here's the say, it said, okay, we have the non-profile user solution, but we didn't accept this proposal as well, because we said it's still, in order to use Threads, if you are a user of a Thread, you still need to have an Instagram account. This is still the case, whether it be active or positive, but you have to have an Instagram account. And for current Thread users, the data merging is still on. There is no remerging. Furthermore, non-profile use was lower quality than profile user quality, which forces users to give their consent, even if they don't like it, if they like a quality service. So Meta didn't propose anything further, nor did it stop its merging practices. So we started imposing a daily fine until they either come up with a sound solution or they stopped this tying. As a follow-up, in May this year, in May 2024, Meta applied to the board informing that all Thread users profiles in Turkey were disabled, and Turkish users would no longer be able to use Threads. Meta's last attempt was found to be in line with the board's decision, because we said, okay, if you want to exit the market, then what can you do? That's the way it is. So that's the daily fine was stopped. This is how the interesting case about Facebook is indeed. I find it quite interesting, the way how they come up with new solutions, and then instead of coming up with a new set of solutions, they stopped their business model. They stopped Threads here, so they have no longer Threads in Turkey. That's their.
This is obviously not a purely Turkish related. I think that's the situation. Yeah. But
right. It seems like it's somewhere else is the same.
Speaking of data combination aspect, and again, wearing your academic hat, I wanted to ask you, do you sense after observing the empirics, after learning so much about their business model, and obviously communicating with peers from other jurisdictions which investigate similar issues, do you think that it's just a matter of principle, or it is kind of a core of their business model to so the added value is categorically obvious for you, that by combining, because a kind of textbook example is yes, of course, but on the other hand, we have somehow intuition that they know that digital gatekeepers know 1,001 way to achieve what they want, to learn what they want by using different techniques which would not. So what is your view on the value of combination of profiles from different services owned by Facebook, but also third parties as well, not as a competition enforcer where you somehow have to say that of course it's quintessential for them, but on the real life somehow perspective. And again, it's pure view, because we are not experts in this. We are not sitting on the data which could tell us to unravel this black box, but still.
Again, this is a very personal, and it's going to be an academic comment, not a competition enforcers comment, and shouldn't be, and it's no binding on my institution. But as an academic who is following platforms and digitalization over the last 15 years or so, let's start with the cliche, but it's true. It's a cliche, but it's true. The efficiency gains are huge. We would never be having these on-demand services. There is no zero-priced services. And then the convenience, the quickness, the pace, the innovation that we are exposed to. So, these services are quite innovative that one can never thought of. But then we are not engineers. So we never know the dynamics behind this business model. It's very difficult to say whether this specific business model is really needed. I am not sure on this one, to tell you the truth. I mean, I really tell you the truth on this, because it looks, as you say, they seem to be knowing much more than what we are learning, and they're always ahead of us. They're always ahead of us in the way they design these platforms, and they're always ahead of us when they extract all this data. I'm not sure all this data extraction is needed. Some sort of data for this business model looks to be, of course, essential. Without this, it doesn't work, because these are, well, in other words, we refer them as data-driven services rather than digital platform. Of course, data, but I'm not sure about the amount of data that is being extracted from each of us. And I'm not sure of this data exchange between all these business models and these ecosystems. These ecosystems are really scary to me. From one hand, okay, they are useful. You log on and then you have everything with one quick link, maps and everything, music, everything is combined all together. What a service. Of course, it's a very efficient service, but then in exchange for this, I'm not sure if you have to, if all these data should be exchanged. I think it's, to my understanding, again, I'm not an engineer, I don't know the dynamics that's going on, but I have people who I know too many people who are excellent, so to say, engineers, and I talk to them more often, and I also see that they're also very skeptic when it comes to this. So this is a new world of information. It's not the world that we used to know. That's the comment I can do.
Please don't comment on what I'll say now, because it's just a conclusion which I make it for myself. And thus, based on what you have, which basically proves my intuition, and I would basically say that the mission in this regard shouldn't be restorative, but rather you do it instrumentally in order to achieve something which is broader than this. You just identify instance of infringement or non-compliance, whatever the vocabulary is, and then you go after it and try to achieve something which is not just to restore the situation. Of course, you do it as a minimum. Okay, let's pause here, because that's a controversial stuff, and I sense it already. But that's part of the DMA, in my reading at least. Okay, the last question before I'll ask you to share some recommendations to students. Turkey is, in many respects, a bridge between Europe and Asia. It's a unique polity, it's a unique country, it's a large country with very vibrant, dynamic economy, and we know its accession story with the EU. It's a saga, yeah, it still continues, but it looks like kind of. So what is the position? And again, I ask you kind of as a descriptive, not a descriptive explication. What is the feeling in Turkish establishment among Turkish political establishment in terms of economic model which works better for them? Is it kind of EU plus, it's sui generis, or is kind of something more hybrid than this? What's the ambition with digital markets and beyond? Is it like you just remain to be Turkey, or some ethos of kind of great past is somehow provoking, tempting to scale and to be more impactful in this global digital race? What's the atmosphere there?
Again, this is a personal impression and personal comment, and then that's how, of course, everybody has a personal story to tell. So what I see is, when I started 26, 20, even a little, so it's been almost a decade, 3 decades now. I can see this saga going on, this European Union saga. And the nation was quite supportive of this European accession at that time. Around the time, we saw everybody was joining in. Everybody joined in. And we said, okay, why not us? Because we are a big, huge country with a very dynamic economy. It's a country, as you rightly said, it's a unique country that binds 2 continents. There's no other one. Plus, it's a very culturally active country because of our recent past. We are the extension of an Ottoman Empire, from a huge empire that covers all cultures, all religions, all different kind of people from 3 different continents. So we have the heritage of this one, and that brings us to have a very lively and a very open. It's an open culture, to be honest with you. It's very open, religion-wise, culture-wise. So we have a very high degree of entrepreneurship. Turks are quite entrepreneurs in it, especially when they go abroad. They become entrepreneurs immediately. They're not bound to limits. So this brings us the question of the nation started questioning this. Why not us? Why not us? And at a certain point, obviously the politicians also under this pressure and the questioning of the nation, we have started looking around, and we see that it's not the only option. And then the Brexit was a very enlightenment for the Turkish population. They said, listen, here is UK. They left it. They were part of it, but they left it. Of course, I'm not going to discuss now that you're connecting from the UK. I've seen it myself a couple of months ago, just last month, how things have changed in the UK economy. I can relate some to this Brexit, some to post-COVID, of course. It's not just one thing, but I can see the political fluctuation as well. So so the world isn't the same as we have discussed, especially thanks to this huge digitalization. It's not the same as it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, borders meant everything. You have to have your neighbors, you do trade. If you do trade with overseas, it's costly. And now look at these platforms and how they work everywhere. Do you need any borders right now? Or do you need any kind of a pact or any pan-Europe, pan-Asia, or anything like this right now? So this is all being questioned here. We are quite active also in our relationship with the Asian side. We just don't look for the West. We also have the Eastern neighbors, which we are quite Ukraine, Russia. From this side, we have the Middle East countries, Gulf countries. Our trade is enlarging also. But having said that, our main trade partners has always been European Union. the first one is always Germany, and then the rest comes. So this gives us a idea of how the economy is located, how the political thing should follow it. I'm quite skeptic. I was very supportive of the European Union membership. But then after 30 years, I say, okay, at least there should be an answer. Maybe we can now, the nation has arrived in a sort of understanding that in order, instead of a membership structure, maybe we can have some kind of a loose relationship in between a full member and a trade partner. So that would be the solution for the time being at least. But that's all I can say from what I see from the political and economic dynamics. But of course, things change quickly in our geography. Until a few years ago, we didn't have these Ukraine-Russia war, which destroyed everything. On our south, we didn't have all these immigrants coming to Turkey. We have 10 million immigrants, including Syrians, Iranians, Ukrainians, Russians, too many different people. And we seem to be quite open to everyone. We are hosting everyone because this is the only gateway. I mean, what can they do? So this gives us an idea of where our strategic positioning is. And this gives us an idea that we are not a static country, we are quite a dynamic country. Another thing is, of course, immigrants from one hand is a little bit of a problematic economically, but then they bring another dynamic to the country, economic dynamic. The second is, we not only have this, but we have a young population. We have a very tech-savvy young population. Our social media users, from the latest numbers that I checked when I was teaching in June and in my own class, sometimes we are the second or the third when it comes to social media. We like to use social media because we like to comment on politically, we like to comment on sports. So this is a very active country on all grounds. It's not a silent country. And it's a huge country. We have 84 million Turkish people, so to say. The population is 84 million. And then we have 10 more million immigrants. That makes 94 million. And the internet penetration is 87%, which is quite high. The number of internet users is let's say 75 million. So that's quite high. This gives you an idea how the country is quite dynamic. So this is my impression of the ongoing political and economic situation.
You know, I really like finishing conversations when there is kind of, you want to put 3 dots, because it's just, you know, it sounds like as if it's just the beginning.
Right, thank you. Right, exactly. This part of the conversation could be extended a little further. Agreed.
Absolutely. And there are so many questions emerging in my internet connection is unstable. I just get the notice. So there are so many questions which are, you know, would be interesting to discuss, and I hope maybe in the future we will have an opportunity to engage deeper in some of these issues, just to learn more about this. But the final question for this conversation is recommendation to students who want to take their position in this rapidly changing regulatory landscape.
Right. This is the question also my students used to I always ask. Well, this word, I always start telling them, I say, listen, this word is not a conventional word anymore. These things have changed a lot. When I was studying, when I was studying economics, and we used to be learning a lot about companies that are supra borders. So we used to talk about them. And now we have digital platform giants, tech giants, one by one, they are, you know, getting giant easily. And this world, I don't think has ever seen such a pace of innovation and such a pace of growth. Any company, any startup may become decacorn immediately. So this is quite strange that we have never seen. This, of course, is 2 dimensions. From one hand, it does unfortunately create a lot of unemployment from one side, especially for those new graduates. And from another perspective, it does create a lot of opportunities for those people who want to do something online. And on the regulatory and competition approach, I think I can easily say it is more dynamic than I started studying competition law. When I started studying competition law. It was a bit static and a little bit boring, to be honest with you. Unilateral conduct, cartel, and that was more static. And we were saying, oh, this is not a competition issue. Okay, this is not a competition issue. This is a consumer protection issue. And we used to say, okay, this is a cartel. Let's check this. So there was a list to check. And then it was quite static indeed. Tying, this is tying. You tie one product to another one. The product markets were quite clear, very clear. You can even, draw them on a paper. And now, how do you define markets? How do you define markets? They're too dynamic. Or how do you define a company? What is a company now? How does one define a company? A platform that is dynamic, that is huge, that is a big tech, doesn't even have an office in Turkey. So is it a company? Yes, it is. It does earn, does that have sales income? Yes, it does. But who does this? So everything has changed. And so on this issue, I am quite positive in suggesting, and I support people who would like to study competition, regulation, digital markets. I would be very happy if people would start studying and getting education in these spheres, because it's no longer in vacuums. This is competition law. This is consumer protection. This is digitals. Here is the data protection. This is how it used to be, right? You would remember. And then now everything is merged, and it's plus. But there's one more thing for students who are in this field, or who would like to study in this field. I have to warn them, there's a lot to learn now. Every morning there is a new chapter. Every morning there's a new saga. Every morning there's a new story. Japan did this. US started this. Oh, there is a new decision on digital. Oh, there is new DMA, DSA. Oh, we did everything. So the definitions have changed. Gatekeepers, significant market powers, things have changed a lot, and they change quickly, very quickly. So there is a lot to learn than I used to learn in the past. This is my last word.
Meltem Bağış Akkaya, thank you very much indeed for this really sincere and very informative conversation. It was a real pleasure for me.
It's a pleasure for my side too. Thanks very much, Alice.